Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Oh, it's
to
an honor
interview you.
to be here.
Where do you come in? How far back is the
My first
connection?
encounter with President Ramos was when I was a congressman. This was period from 1998 until 2007.
Oh, okay.
Various times I would visit him and seek his counsel about a lot of issues, particularly on national defense and regional issues, and just to seek his advice and wisdom about roles of budding politicians at the time. And I had an interest in national defense issues, and we knew a lot of common people, and so that was the start of the interaction with him.
Any particular reason why him? I mean,
Well,
of course, senior leader, but
it's not being a senior leader was fine, but his experience in both the military, the civilian side, in the executive side was really impressive. His academic background was also akin to mine. We were both schooled also in some part of our lives in UP and in the United States. But what really motivated me to seek him out was I had encounters with two gentlemen. The first one was Eric Javier,
oh, okay.
who was the provincial director of Tarlac province of the PNP when I was starting out. And Eric was really also a person who would give me good advice. And I saw the style of leadership of Eric, it was very professional and institutional. And he told me a lot about his experiences with FVR, with President Ramos as his aide. And next was with Sani Rason.
Oh, okay.
Sani's leadership in the PNP was respected, and his words regarding President Ramos were likewise, very inspiring. And so these two people also motivated me to seek President Ramos out and ask his counsel.
His influence shaped their careers.
Oh, very much.
Diba?
Very, very much.
You were seeking for a mentor?
Well, in a sense, now that you mentioned it, yes. Yes, because we entered government not in a chaotic time, but it became chaotic because in our first term as congressmen, we had three speakers. That was the impeachment of President Estrada, where we found ourselves in the opposition. And then Speaker Villar was replaced by Speaker Fuentebella, and then Speaker Fuentebella was replaced by Speaker Belmonte. And so it was a
flux.
It was a tumultuous time, let's put it that way. And you tend to seek stability in leadership in these types of situations. So I guess
he exuded that, no?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And it was a method of his life and his work system. Even when I was in the Department of National Defense, I insisted really on completed staff work, professionalization of the department and all the agencies under.
Oh my gosh. You also fell into the ambit of CSW?
Yes, yes, and I demanded it from my staff. It's impossible not to demand CSW when you're a decision maker in any top-level agency in the country because of the sheer amount of paperwork that's required. Number one, by law. Number two, by regulations. And number three, post-audit by the Commission on Audit from you. And if you don't demand completed staff work, then I don't see how issues can be properly vetted. Secondly, CSW is also important to control, number one, for intelligence purposes, document security
Right.
and issue security, and number two, for an adequate traceability of things approved, properly ordered. Because if there is no CSW and properly managed issue flow in an office, then everything gets
It's
lost.
shambles.
Yeah.
But I guess it also appealed to you, management, and you being in the high-level positions
It
that
did.
you were, no?
It did. In the department side, that was the second phase. That was from 2007 until 2009. There also, I sought closer counsel from him. And his help was really on, I would say, 3 or 4 major issues. Number one issue was the necessity of a sustainable peace. He was always very adamant about it. Admittedly, I was a bit on the aggressive side, on the law and order side, on the enforcement side, but President Ramos had a more strategic outlook over it. Secondly, we're on regional geopolitical issues, where we really had to balance our relationships and engagements with our neighbors, and not necessarily only with our neighbors, but with our allies, with the end in view also of developing our own capability to stand on our feet, which is virtually impossible for any country to do so now, but at least to have some credible defense
Right. Right.
and credible positions on geopolitical, regional, or international issues. Thirdly was the human touch, because a lot of the issues in the defense establishment are also vented through the retirees. These are this is a very group of veterans, the Association of Generals and Flag Officers, the pensioners, and you have to pay close attention to them. Not only because they are a valuable source of feedback, not only because they also are a source of a family tradition of service to country,
Right.
but thirdly, as a way also of recompensing them with the honor that they deserve in serving their country. I remember the first thing he told me when I sat as Secretary of Defense. He knew who the oldest living past Secretary of Defense was at that time.
Right.
That was former Secretary Ernesto Mata, who at that time was already 100 or 101, and he asked me, "Do you visit him?" And I did so, and I made sure that Secretary Mata, I knew of his condition as a way of showing honor and respect to a predecessor and to a World War II veteran and former Chief of Staff, I believe.
I think he was, yes.
Yes.
Terrific. Oh my gosh. So nag-mentor na talaga.
Oo.
Oo.
He really mentored already, and really for a very young Secretary of Defense, needed a lot of it, because there are contemporary issues that you have to deal with, but on the overall strategic phase of things, you really need the institutional knowledge of one with a lot of experience.
How did he take to mentoring you?
Very, very openly.
Di ba stricto o parang naging professor, naging
No,
teacher?
not at all. Not at all. I think there was the authority, but the authority was very gentle. It was not a compulsive authority. And secondly, we were in a relaxed atmosphere. Me with bourbon and him with brandy. So
Terrific.
yeah.
No arguments about
No, not at all, not at all. And I was really surprised at his stamina. And I think
at that age.
yes, no, and I think having said that he mentored. I do the same thing with a lot of young people in the defense establishment now.
Paying forward.
Yes. And it feels good to be able to impart whatever you have experienced, because it's a waste if you keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then the third phase was in the political phase. That's when I decided to run for president.
Okay.
And there he was very vocal about his support for me, which I thank him very much for, and I always owe him a debt of gratitude for that. But that support is always ingrained in my mind, that I had to wage an honorable campaign, a positive campaign, and one which looked forward, which I tried to do.
Let me get this out of the way. Your clan.
Yes.
Ambassador Cojuangco in particular was a rival in the '92 elections. Both of them ran there, and considerably Ambassador Cojuangco was the most formidable among the other contenders, opponent of FVR. I mean, how did you take to that?
Well,
that he was at one time a political rival.
Well, there was a rivalry, but there was respect. I don't think there was any disrespect between both of them. They both respected each other and admired each other in some way. And so it was easy for me to relate to President Ramos. Secondly, my father was in the United States when President Ramos was a cadet in West Point. My father was working there already. My father's older brother was a minister or of some rank in the Philippine mission, then the Philippine Embassy. And I think he knew President Ramos. And my father was started in government in 1966.
FVR was
during the onset of the Marcos regime. And then my mother had a very good working relationship with him, because my mother was an assemblywoman and deputy minister of the budget.
Oh, okay.
And so she was shepherding the budget of the Ministry of National Defense together with other agencies at that time. So I think the working styles of my parents were closer to his.
Okay.
Because my uncle was an entrepreneur and they have different working styles.
So ano pala, mas broader yung connection.
Mas broader kasi on my parents' side, no?
Yeah. Not just from Ambassador Cojuangco.
Because on my parents' side, it was a more technocratic, a little bit political side. With my uncle, it was an entrepreneurial and a partisan political angle, no?
Let me get to the initial interactions. '98 when you were first
Yes.
took your seat at the House. As you mentioned earlier, it was a time of flux, political turmoil. That you had 3 speakers. The other thing was, by the time that Congress ended its session, we had 2 presidents.
Yes. Yes.
No, that one, that one. What were the interactions with FVR like? This was the start of your interactions with him?
After that imbroglio, that was the start. After that, that political...
The impeachment.
Yeah, because at that time, I was an assistant majority floor leader, and I was really busy. And then I became a minority, assistant minority floor leader. Our minority leader became Butsakino. Yeah, because he was when Speaker Montebella was removed, he decided not to run anymore for the speakership, and former Senator Congressman Butsakino, the late Butsakino, ran against Speaker Belmonte. And me, because of party loyalty, I stayed with the the late Butz Aquino, who was a great person to work with, actually. But then, with Speaker Belmonte, he was like an uncle to me because his youngest son, Miguel, was my classmate from prep until fourth year high school and one of my best friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the relationship, although adversarial politically, was very cordial and very cooperative, actually. And actually, I believe my leadership of our bloc in the opposition at that time led to a stable transition of the government, because had we opposed very strongly a lot of things, number one, Tito Gingona would not have been easily the vice president. It would, yeah, because we had to elect him. And secondly, a lot of measures like the budgets would have been stalled. It would have been eventually passed, but a lot easier.
Postered.
Yeah, because at that time, what the country needed was stability more than anything else. Unfortunately, though, and I agree with him at this time, during the latter part of his term, he saw the need to change our institutional, political, constitutional system. Because our system, when added to our psyche, will not lead to stability at all. Nationally elected officials, aside from the president, term limits every 3 years, a constitution which ingrains really discordance and checks more than synergy cannot work. First world norms such as this cannot really be efficient in a third world country with a lot of problems, particularly in the specter of domestic instability in terms of terrorism and the like.
Where were you during that time, 96, 98? Because now that you mentioned it, that was about the time that, if you remember, People's Initiative, Pirma.
Oh, in 96, I was still in Harvard at the time.
Okay.
But I really saw a lot of flaws in the 87 Constitution. And that was a paradox during, no, not a paradox, but it was a penitentia during our time, because I entered law school 1985. And so we were schooled for 1 year, Constitutional Law 1 and 2, on the 1973 Constitution. Then we had the Freedom Constitution, Executive Order number 1.
Right.
Then we had the 87 Constitution right before we took the bar exam. And we had to take the bar exam with the 87 Constitution, with the new Family Code, and with the new Labor Code, which we didn't study at all.
Oh, my.
And the 87 really was a reactive constitution
To the 73.
to the 73 Constitution. Actually, a lot of people say the 73 was good, absent Amendment number 6, which really negated the whole supremacy of the legislature at the time. And of course, the ultra-nationalistic provisions.
So you were in law school then?
I was in law school from June 10, 1985 until we graduated in 89.
18. Okay. 96. Yeah. They said 6 years was too short for a good man. And the argument nga was, they wanted to allow him the opportunity to seek a second term. And that was really the thought behind the People's Initiative and Pirma. Was that something you supported?
I think more than 6 years is too short for a good man. 6 years is too short to transform, to start a viable mechanism to support long-term reforms in a country. I mean, in just infrastructure alone, you can see it. You see there's no continuity of long-term infrastructure every change in administration. Like the Skyway, it took so long for there to be an extension of the Skyway. And now, at least, there are convergence points being built, but it takes time. Look, it took how many years from, let's say, the last century before a 4 to 6 lane expressway reached 130 kilometers away from the country. That pace of development is snail-paced. Number two, we have an airport with only one major runway. It's unacceptable in other countries. Thirdly, we don't have tunnels. So every time there's a disaster, we can't pass through Dalton Pass. Cannon Road is closed because of landslides. We don't have bridging between islands.
No.
I mean, water impounding systems are not there. Thirdly,
and that's long-term.
we have a policy on extracting our natural resources, but it's still not optimized. Now, in a country like this, there is room for discordance, but then at one point in time, you have to say, I have to take action. And because of these things, then maybe a fixed term of 6 years is really too short. No? But more than that, that's looking on the national sphere. But we have to look at the local sphere also. There is not enough attention, assuming issues are paid attention to not enough attention given to both local and national issues in any election. Why? Because elections are synchronized. So any candidate, particularly, let's say a candidate for senator, 12 are running every one period of time. Okay? These people are elected nationally. They only have how many minutes on a stage to say what they have to say. Right? And the attention span of people is quite short, admittedly. And assuming further that they will vote for 12, which is quite
That's a stretch.
quite a stretch. Maybe they might vote for 3 or 4. So what is the motivation? You tell them something that clicks, so they'll remember you. But that's not issue-based. On the local politics, though, I mean, it's more personal rather than performance-based. But at least the performance has greater weight in local politics because people feel really whether their mayor or their councilors are doing well or not. But then again, to give due respect and weight to both local and national issues, which is also why the Constitution should be amended, these elections should be separated. So, yeah. So on the local end, local government development is really the key also for proper development of the country, and it's going to be a painful experiment, if ever, because people will vote for their feet, with their feet rather. If a local government unit's not performing well, they leave. They migrate. But there's no choice because we're an archipelago of 7,000 islands. You really cannot have Imperial Manila controlling everything, which is why one of the tenets of the Lakas Charter is decentralization and subsidiarity, where decision-making should be done at the lowest level possible.
How you served out the stretch, of
Yes,
your
I did.
term. You had 3 terms.
I did.
And then during this time, you were meeting up with FVR. So all mostly national security, local development.
And there was one particular issue which which affected both of us. It was the Agno River Flood Control Development Project, no?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the San Roque Dam.
Something he started, no?
Yes, because the northern part of Tarlac historically Actually, our hometown of Paniki historically was one of the first, if not the first, town of Pangasinan ever chartered.
Medyo
Because
nalipat.
our district was part of Pangasinan.
Oh,
And south of that, the certain towns were part of Pampanga. And Tarlac was created as a military district area, no?
okay, yeah.
So
Right,
so the
right.
issues in his district of Pangasinan, which is the sixth district of Pangasinan and the first district of Tarlac, are common because we have a common boundary.
Shared yung ano.
Shared boundary and shared problems of flooding and of water scarcity. This was really magnified after Pinatubo,
Yeah.
because a major river, the Tarlac River, empties into the Agno Basin. And Lahar emptied into it and clogging a lot of areas.
Right.
So the issue affected us both, and he was really adamant about our continuing to strengthen the project.
And then you were appointed
Yes.
by PGMA to
Right.
head the Defense Department. And that's where I guess a lot more
Synergy
there
happened,
were,
yeah.
between the two of you. How did he influence you into deciding
No,
for no for I'm going to lead to the decision to run
Oh.
for president in 2010? How much of an influence was he on that decision?
I think on the decision itself, I think it was post-decision and pre-decision where the influence was very strong. The decision point, I believe, was a factor of many. It was a product of many factors. Let's put it that way. But even before that decision and after, I decided really I would conduct myself in a way which would not put his trust in me to waste. I would conduct myself as a statesman would, which I tried to do. And that, I think, was the most valuable thing, because for me, FVR stands for statesmanship and institution building. Those two things are which our country really needs.
How did you take to the situation where FBR, by association, he was emeritus of Lakas. You were
Chairman for a
you were,
time,
di ba? And you were standard bearer.
Yes.
He supported Mrs. Aquino all throughout her administration, and you were running against
Well,
Noy.
I think his support, he was able to disassociate the support to each individual on a personal level, but his association with these individuals was given his thought on the best individual to help the country in his judgment, and whom he could work with, whom he could relate to. So I believe, I hope I'm not being presumptuous, he could relate to my method, he could relate to me, and he could not perhaps relate to the second President Aquino as good as he could with me.
How did that make you feel? That, I mean,
Well,
he saw much of the talents and
well,
the
it
potential.
humbles me, actually. Up to now, up to this day, it humbles me. It's just like when I also talked to his province mate, Frankie Jose.
Oh, okay.
It also humbles me very well. As a matter of fact, I was just talking to him yesterday, out of the blue, and you know, endorsement, not endorsements. I'm sorry, I used the wrong term, but feelings like this, particularly for a person who's much younger than you, can't but humble you.
How do you reconcile? Well, you were standard bearer for Lakas-Kampi nga ba? Ano ba
Yes.
yun? Di ba? Lakas-Kampi.
Lakas-Kampi-CMD.
CMD. Right?
Yeah.
Oo. But that also actually resulted in a parting of ways of sorts between FVR and GMA.
Yes.
If you remember.
Yes.
Because he felt to a certain extent that there was some delusion of the Lakas vision
Yeah.
by bringing in Kampi.
Yes.
How did you reconcile that?
Well, I think on the part of the group of President Arroyo at the time, it was a necessary thing to do to gather as big a majority as possible. And it was a vehicle through which, people from, I wouldn't say dichotomous, but opposite beliefs could be united under one standard bearer party. But naturally, that weakened both parties. So I think because of the political situation at the time, because of the non-institutionalization of political parties in the country, by their inability actually to get credible party financing, which is an issue that really has to be faced and addressed by this country. If a lot of things in this country, and we shouldn't be afraid to admit it, boils down to the lack of financial support to credible institutions. Even our bureaucracy, which is, to me, one area rather than the political system, which needs to be focused on. We really need to strengthen this bureaucracy because there is your continuity lies.
No, sila yun eh.
Yes,
that's it.
There. So, but we don't pay attention to it, and we have to admit, particularly nowadays in the age of millennials, what comes first before doesn't rule true today. What comes first today are different things, and you have to adjust in order to motivate people to behave in a certain manner rather than coerce them into doing so. So absent the political structure to develop these kinds of lasting mechanisms, you're going to see the same thing again and again.
It was about that decade as well that FBR was transitioning, if you can say, if you can call it that, from citizen Eddie, elder statesman, senior leader, and this brings to mind Boao and his attendance in so many other. He was sought out.
Yes.
He became a voice for development, no? for the developing regions
Yes.
of the world. Interactions then with him?
At the time he was active in Boao, I was also transitioning. So the interactions were existing, but more on just to maintain the connections and ties, more on the defense realm. And to me, he's one of the most successful former presidents in transitioning to a statesman role.
Re-engineered himself.
Yes. But we've seen former presidents just re-enter the political arena.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was really successful in saying, I've done my job and this continues this way. How I wish that we had a mature electorate mature political culture that will be able to appreciate this. And that's why your project is really valuable, because maybe future generations might decide that, hey, we gotta wake up, we gotta put our act together and revisit these times.
You've stayed connected.
Yes, we have.
What are the discussions like?
Oh, when we see each other, it's in the company of his former comrades and my former, how should I say, clients, because the retirees, the veterans in Camp Aguinaldo, and it's all a very, very pleasant encounter, or change of command ceremonies.
Oh, okay.
Where he still attends, and he enjoys seeing it, because the transitions are very orderly, and it's an example really to the civilian side of things, where military turnovers and transitions are an exercise in honor and in orderliness.
Yeah. Smooth.
So the encounters were more on a personal level.
Oh, okay. On a personal level as well. So bourbon and brandy exchange.
Not anymore now, but
no, but what I mean is, what about golf?
I did play a few times.
Okay.
But then I stopped playing golf. But I would see him on the golf course, because I enjoyed the interaction after the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the clubhouse and. Lessons learned from him as senior leader of the party, elder statesman, president.
I think the lesson learned, number one, is for a country to be relevant, for a leader to be relevant, you have to have gravitas. And that comes about in several ways. But you have to prove that, you have to prove yourself, and you have to earn your spurs somehow, some way. In the international sphere, gravitas comes from being able to engage in your peers in a way which gathers respect, not only because of who you are, but also because of the content of what you say and what you do. And that is really important for any country, any leader. It's gravitas. Number two, you have to build strong institutions. If not, everything crumbles. There will be no culture built in. The values will be shaped by the marketplace rather than you shaping the marketplace. And number three is really professionalism. And lastly, you can't have these three if you don't have competence. So competence is really important, particularly in continuing to absorb new knowledge.
That's at the core, no? Is that the FVR legacy?
There's another thing which is really important, and it's hard even for me to do. It's to listen.
Okay.
To listen, and then to parse and discern what was done. And lastly, it's really also a work ethic. I mean, his work ethic is legendary.
Driven.
Yeah, it's a driven work ethic. So with President Arroyo. To me, it's really institutionalism, institution building, competence, professionalism, gravitas. And I think what the challenge to FVR's legacy is, right now we're seeing problems in the civilian, in the private sector, attracting people to work for a career. Because young people nowadays, I think, view career as a perpetual bondage to something. That is why actually we're seeing a lot of recruitment from the military side.
Yeah.
Because there is dedication, there's commitment, and there's mission execution culture there. So the challenge is how FVR's legacy can be emulated by the future leaders by way of dedicating the required amount of time for them to mature as competent leaders. Because maturity, look at the Singapore politicians. They mature in office.
Yeah.
They're seasoned, they're trained.
And they start when
Yeah.
very young.
Yeah. Even in their military establishment, when they transition, they're well schooled in other fields. The armed forces, a viable armed force, to be such, needs to be multidisciplinary in training. And thus the training's horizon and the training area of training is really wide. And so you will see the transition really well. FVR dedicated his whole professional life to public service and governance. The challenge will be for us also, everyone, is how to translate his personal example, his official example, to emulate for younger people now to follow the career track. Now, practically speaking, I see a lot of young men and women right now joining the military academies, which is a wonderful way to start your public career, and probably his vision should also, and his example should also be spread to them in order for them to take to make wise choices in their career, particularly in the area of continuing relevant education.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Maraming salamat.